This video is a review of Module 2, dividing fractions and calculating with decimals, which is everything we've done since fall break. During this video, please feel free to work ahead. If you need to pause the video, calculate the problems on your own, and then come back to the video to check your answers. Also feel free to pause, rewind, and rewatch as needed. The first portion of this review is going to be decimal operations, and problems 1 and 2 asks you to find the sum or difference. As a reminder, when you're adding and subtracting decimals, you must line up the decimal point. So I'm going to write this problem 18 and 35 hundredths minus 4 and 16 hundredths. My decimals are lined up. I'm going to go ahead and place the decimal in the answer. Go ahead and subtract. 2 minus 1 is 1. 8 minus 4 is 4. And bring down the 1. So our answer is 14 and 19 hundredths. Number 2. Again, we're adding, so we're going to line those decimals up. I'm going to rewrite the problem. 7 and 21 hundredths plus 11 and 6 tenths. Now this problem could have been written the other way around with the larger number on top. Both of the numbers, though, have the same number of digits, so it really doesn't matter how you write these as long as the decimal points are lined up. In the answer, I'll place my decimal point there as well. Because this hundredths place is blank, you can use a 0 as a placeholder if it makes it easier to add. Go ahead and add. 1 plus 0 is 1, 2 plus 6 is 8, 7 plus 1 is 8, and bring down that 1. Our answer is 18 and 81 hundredths. And moving on, number 3 is a word problem. Mike needs to replace two sides of his fence. One side is 367 and 9 hundredths meters long, and the other is 329 and 3/10 meters long. How much fence does Ben need to buy? The first question you need to ask is, what operation will we be using? Because our question is how much does he need to buy, we want to know the total amount of fence. And with the total, we're going to be adding. The first thing we need to do is convert this mixed number into a decimal, and this one's rather easy because the denominator is already 100. So we keep the whole number 367. We convert that 9/10 to a decimal of 9/10. Oh, sorry, that's 9 hundredths. 329 and 3/10, we keep the whole number 329. And here's where we keep the 3/10. Again, this place value is empty, so we can hold it with a 0. We are adding. To set this up, we keep our decimal place in the same spot, lined up with the two add-ins in our problem. Go ahead and calculate. 9 plus 0, 0 plus 3, 7 plus 9, 6 plus 1 plus 2, and 3 plus 3. So our answer is 696 and 39 hundredths. Because this is a word problem, we're going to want to answer it with a sentence. Ben needs to buy 696 and 39 hundredths meters of fence. Okay, on to the next question. Find the product using partial product and the distributive property. And remember, when we did this, we know we can break one of the factors down because 22 and 12 hundredths is our decimal. That is the same as saying 22 whole plus 12 hundredths. We're still going to multiply both of those numbers by the 500. When we distribute, we get 500 times 22. We keep that addition sign, plus, then we multiply 500 times 12 hundredths. When we multiply that out, I'm not going to show you that. You can go off to the side and do your long multiplication. When we multiply that out, we get 11,000 plus 60, which when we add that together, we get 11,060. Okay, for the next one, we are to find the product. And again, product means we're going to multiply 34 and 62 hundredths times 12 and 8 tenths. And because we have two decimals here, we used our grid paper, so I'm going to go ahead and transfer this problem over to grid paper at this point. And when we're multiplying decimals, please keep in mind, we do not need to line up the decimal. We simply align our number off to the right-hand side of our grid paper, and we can place our decimal points within those factors. Once we have that lined up, we can go ahead and multiply like normal. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 6 is 48, plus 1 is 49. 8 times 4 is 32, plus 4 is 36. 8 times 3 is 24, plus 3 is 27. Once we finish that first line of numbers, we can cross out the number that we've finished, and we can also cross out all those numbers we carried and place our 0 in the next row. We're done with that place value. We move on and multiply the 2 by every number in the first factor. 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 6 is 12, 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9, 2 times 3 is 6. Once we finish that, we can cross out that place value and anything we've carried in the process. And we move to the next row where we hold the place value from the 8 and from the 2 with a 0. And we're going to go ahead and multiply our last number. 1 times every number in the first factor. And we need to add those numbers up. 9 plus 4 is 13. 6, 7 plus 4 is 11. 8, 14, 23, 14. And here's our answer. We need to go back to the problem to determine how many decimal place values there will be in our answer. Because the first factor has 2 decimal place values, 2 numbers after the decimal, and the second factor has 1 place value after the decimal. When we add those up, our answer should have 3 place values after the decimal. So we get an answer of 443 and 136 thousandths. Okay, and we're going to turn the page. The next two problems, we're going to move on to division. We worked with finding the quotient of some larger numbers here than what we're used to. And if you remember the process we discussed, we're going to take 205,276 and divide it by the number 38. So in our process, our first step was to jot down the multiples of 38. This is just one of our resources we can use in this long division to make it a little bit easier. So go ahead and copy down your multiples of 38. I went up through 7 times 38. You can pause the video and get your multiples and then come back to divide with me. Okay, once we have our problem set up, we're going to ask ourselves, can 38 go into 2? And it cannot. Can 38 go into 20? It cannot. Can 38 go into 205? So let's use our reference, our multiples of 38. Find out how many times 38 can go into 205 without going over. And we see that it can go in 5 times. 5 times 38 is 190. That multiples table's done for us, so that makes that easy. And now we subtract. We bring down that 2, and now we say, how many times can 38 go into 152? And again, now that we have this multiple tables done, it's real easy to see 38 goes in 4 times. Multiply 4 times 38, we do get 152. When we subtract and bring down our next place value, we get the number 7. 38 cannot go into 7, and we can only bring one number down per step, so we actually have to put a 0 in here. 38 cannot go into 7. So when we multiply, we get 0, and then again we subtract and bring down that last place value for 76. And we see that 38 goes into 76 2 times, for a final answer of 5,402. And the next division that we discussed in Module 2 was dividing by decimals, with decimals and by decimals. And number 7 actually has a decimal in the dividend, and the divisor. When we go ahead and write that out, we know that we cannot have a decimal in the divisor, so we've got to make this number a whole number. In order to do that, we're going to move the decimal place 1 point to the right, or we know that's multiplying by 10. And because we did that to the divisor, we have to do the same thing to the dividend. So we're going to multiply the dividend by 10 as well, moving that decimal place 1 place to the right. And when we have a decimal in the house, we raise it to the roof. So now you can recopy your problem if you'd like, and I'm going to go ahead and transfer mine over to the grid paper to once again show you how it can be done and kept neat and straight on the grid paper. Once we've moved our decimal place, we now have the problem 155 with the decimal place at the end divided by the whole number 62. Once that decimal's here, we're going to place it in the same place in our answer, and we're going to go ahead and move on. Again, making this multiples table makes our long division a whole lot easier. So please pause the video and get your multiples of 62. Okay, now that we've got our multiples table, we can go ahead and divide. Can 62 go into 1? No, it cannot. Can 62 go into 15? No, it cannot. So now we need to see how many times 62 can go into 155. Looking at our multiples table, we know we can only it can only go in 2 times without going over, and 2 times 62 is 124. When we subtract, we are left with 31, and we